Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 26 of the UK League Chat podcast. Um, it's a first for us on the podcast because we got Froomie here, League of Legends
Hello.
director from Barrage, and Froomie, you are our first return guest, not
Oh,
counting Tom, who was on every week before I made him co-host. So other than Tom, you are the first return guest, so an honour, I think.
well, yeah, absolute pleasure. Brilliant.
And to start with, I wanted to say about your role in Barrage because I'm not sure. Was it before this split that you got that title changed to League of Legends director? Because I saw there was some people on Twitter asking what the difference really is with that. So
I've been basically doing the same thing at Barrage like the whole time, and the same with the other orgs that I've been on. But I think the title of manager has been like stigmatized a little bit. So I asked Jeff if we could come up with a new title, and we said League of Legends director because I think that sort of covers more about what I'd do. So that's why we went with that, and then everyone just started copying it.
fair enough. And before we go too much into Barrage and what you've been doing this split, um, something we haven't spoken about with you on the podcast, but it was something I think you were quite vocal about on Twitter was with the EU Masters seeding.
Okay,
And we've
yeah.
kind of gone into it a couple of times already, so there's probably not too much we can say. I just kind of wondered what your thoughts were on it and the thoughts from Barrage, because we haven't really asked someone that was, I think, other than I think we asked Smeagol, who's a coach, but someone who's in the sort of management side. Was that something even to the org that was
Well,
quite a
I
surprise, or?
I'd take time to think about my answer, but I don't think they took time to think about the seeding, to be honest. It's farcical, isn't it? Like, it's a joke. I could potentially accept, having two group spots because that's the same as the UKLC seeding was, the split before when we were a separate region to the Nordics. Um, I think if you look at the statistics, like Turok did a very good bit of research and he published on Twitter. Showing that the Nordics hasn't even done that badly, but the UK certainly doesn't deserve to be below, say, Poland, even though Poland did just have a really good recent EU Masters. But the fact that we have got one group in a playing spot just doesn't seem right. And I was like fully convinced that straight away they haven't even looked at the UK and the Nordics as separate regions when doing the seedings. All they've seen is the NLC, realised that it covers the Nordics, and then gone, Nordic seeding. Like that is what they're giving us, the Nordic seeding. And then they've just scrapped the UK seeding and said, okay, who's the next one up? Okay, give a group spot to Greece and give a playing spot to I think the playing spot went to no, the other group spot went to Poland, didn't it?
Mm.
Um and the fact that the NLC, the region that it is, the strength of the teams, how big the orgs are, how many of them there are, how many countries there are in it, is that on the same tier as Italy and Greece just doesn't make sense at all. I'm not saying that Greece and Italy are bad regions by any stretch. Like there are good teams in those regions, but the NLC is a much bigger region. Talent's bigger. It just doesn't make sense for it to be on the same level. It'd be like the Premier League being on the same tier as, well, Greece. It just
I
doesn't
think
work.
I think what I think the backlash is the fact that it's not two group stages. I think you could get away. Obviously, I believe that they should get three, but I think you could
Mhm.
kind of be like, oh well, they've given us two group spots.
Yeah,
If we just perform, which we probably will do, then that will increase due time. And because
yeah.
I think that with the way EU Masters works, they kind of like stick to a very similar format in both of the EU Masters, and the next EU Masters it could be a completely different setup anyway.
I
Um,
think the main thing the UK orgs are annoyed about is the fact that we had two group stage spots before.
mhm.
The UK's done well in almost every EV Masters. Like even in the most recent one, both the academy teams got to the quarterfinals.
Yeah.
And I just know that they've not even they've just scrapped the UK as a region
Mhm.
and and we've been given the seeding for Nordic.
It
And they
feels like a
haven't thought twice
downgrade.
about it. It
Yeah.
is a downgrade, and that's why we're annoyed. Like I'm annoyed about it. Um, it just feels like a punishment and it's not warranted. Like
Yeah.
I would have been annoyed if we didn't get two groups in a play-in because I think when you're in a combined region and you've got 12 teams in a league, where two of them are academy teams, remember, Italy and Greece don't have
Mhm.
any academy teams and Poland only has one. It's just farcical. Like, it makes no sense. And I think whoever's been doing the seeding for EU Masters over at Riot needs to look at that and should probably be asked a few difficult questions because it's just not on really.
Yeah, because that's what I said last time we spoke about it on here, that like we can try and think of what their thought process was, but it's like it feels like we're putting more time into thinking about it than they did.
Definitely, yeah.
It's literally they just thought, okay, chuck these lot in here and that's it, and yeah, had no second thoughts about it.
I think the first thing they thought about is where are the UK seeds going? Like, because I
Yeah.
think they literally just scrapped it and just said, right, NLC is Nordic. Where are these two seeds going? Greece and Poland, and then that was it.
Do you see that? Well, without knowing if they would change it next time around, do you think for next split it could even be harder to actually get players into the league? Because if you're thinking if you're a player that wants to go to E Masters and you think, well, this league's got 2 spots and there's 2 academy teams, is there really much point?
The good thing is that it's the long off season coming up, which is the September, October to January, February off season, which gives Riot a much bigger window to communicate with the orgs about what their plans are for 2021. I think that there's no way that people at Riot didn't see the backlash and will have thought about it. And to be honest, I'm confident that the NLC will at least have a team in quarterfinals at least. But it's just clawing back up, and it's like, how are you going to take those spots away from some of the other teams now? Like, how are the NLC going to take spots away from Poland? How are they going to take spots away from? Well, potentially they can take spots away from Spain, but it's just we've unfairly got to claw our way back up into being a top 4 seed now.
Yeah.
Even though we were already. They might change the format though, because that's something that Riot likes to do.
I think that the format change. To be fair, I've always said that I know it adds more teams in, but I think increase the tournament size. I think there are actual nations which have 3-4 good teams which should be going in, especially in like Spain, even in Germany. Like maybe not get like 4 Balkan spots or something. Don't do something stupid like that. But to strengthen maybe like those like big prime leagues, give them like a Champions League where they get like 4 spots or something like that.
You can increase the size of the tournament, but then it's the time that goes with it, because obviously an increased tournament size takes longer unless they change the format somehow.
But they could just reduce the playing stages to make it more of a minor region kind of thing, couldn't they? Instead of having like, well, to be fair, then you won't have the upsets like Mad Lions, I guess, or something. Yeah, so there's the to and fro with either way, isn't there?
Yeah, potentially you could do it. It's just how Riot wants to balance its times.
Yeah.
Especially around the EU Masters coming up. I know that they won't want it clashing with Worlds in any way, shape, or form, because they don't like it when tournaments do that. I think we had Forge of Champions clash with Worlds one year, and we had to play earlier games in order to not clash with the World schedule. There was the one where we had the UKLC final at like 10 in the morning because MSI was on later on and you can't clash with it. So yeah, that was a fun one. That was great for the UK scene, and people question its viewership, but you have the final at 10 in the morning, so yeah.
Never mind. Let's talk about the actual league itself then. So this is obviously the first split of the NLC, and so were you quite heavily involved in both rosters then? Because I know some other teams we saw that got like a manager for the for their academy team. Munster being one where they sort of moved Mulgrew around for that. But I saw like Officer Naughty saying at M&M that he was doing both. So was that something you were?
I was working with both. Yeah. Obviously we have ENCE now for the UKLC, but she's a bit more rough around the edges. Like she's very fresh. So it was mainly for the UKLC team. It was mainly me and Kiao, and then for the NLC team, it was me, AJ, and Souza that were doing the NLC team. So yeah, I was heavily involved in both. Yeah.
What was that like then? Was it literally like double the work? Was it quite a bit harder?
So we aimed to get the NLC team done first because we thought the UKLC just seemed a bit mad at the time because people were throwing around quite a lot of money, and we haven't dedicated a huge amount of funding to the UKLC team. So we were like, let's focus on the NLC team and then wait for the UKLC team to die down, because in the UK things don't get wrapped up until like quite late on. So I was confident that there was still going to be a lot of players on the market that we could speak to anyway. But the NLC project did take a lot longer time than I expected because, I don't think it's a secret that Barrage operates on one of the smallest budgets in both leagues. So the smaller budget you have, the longer your off season tends to take, and the harder work it is to get players involved. So yeah, it did come to a point where it was like double the work, and I'm not gonna lie, like one off season is stressful enough. So when you've got two, it is difficult. But yeah, we got through it in the end. But yeah, ups and downs in the off season. You don't always get what you want, but you make it work with what you do end up with.
Cool. And let's talk about the roster a bit then, because last time I think we had you on, I don't remember if it was yourself or when we had Jeff on, but it was someone said that there would be offers for basically for everyone that was on the team last split. There would be offers for them to stay. So were you close at all to keeping any of those guys, or was it something you thought after? Because obviously, like
we were
Flares and
potentially
Sybil,
close. We were potentially close to keeping one, but with Flares and Sybil, obviously we couldn't bring them back, and that was the shame because we lost Sybil before the playoffs as well because he had to return home to Australia because Australia was going to ground the flights, so they were offering Australian residents to come home, and it just so happened that like his flight was on the Tuesday and we were playing on that Tuesday, so we had monkeys on the bench.
Can't help as well, isn't it? That's just one of those.
Yeah, I mean, the team wasn't in hot form at the time, but like I think they probably would have done a bit better against Fnatic with Sybil because they had that synergy. Like I love Monkeys as a player, but it's just the synergy between him and the rest of the players wasn't there as much. Although he did come in and do a really, really good job. It was quite lucky I put him on the bench, to be honest, after he got dropped by Demise. Otherwise, we would have been royally, royally fucked. Yeah. So, and with Flares, he went back to America, and with the way things are at the minute, it's just impossible to bring people back. We got outbid for every other player.
I can imagine probably one player would have definitely been like Ericsson, wouldn't it? Was probably
we tried very, very hard to keep Ericsson, but at the end of the day, like Nordavind heavily resourced, and they had Hansen there now, who obviously he's Norwegian and Ericsson's Norwegian, but Hansen has a huge name in the ERLs these days, so trying to convince Ericsson to come and play for us for less was just very difficult, especially when he'd been with Nordavind for a long, long time. Obviously, he was on loan to us from them. We put forward a good offer, an offer that would have made Ericsson the highest paid player in Barrage history, but it still wasn't enough. So, and then with Kevo, he was another one that we potentially wanted to keep, but ENCE just offered him ludicrous money, and we couldn't compete for him. Haddo was a bit of a stranger one because we were stuck in a situation where our original roster plans had fallen through, and then Haddo had to give a final decision to the Greek team, and we said, Haddo, like we don't have a roster at the minute because we've been outbid for all the players. So that's why Haddo ended up taking a good offer from Greece, which is not necessarily a region he wanted to go to, but the offer was good for him. So
but they got an extra EU Masters spot this year, so.
Yeah. And to be honest, Haddo's team's top of the league at the minute, so I expect we should see Haddo in EUM.
Kievo got that good Finnish money, wasn't it, from ENCE, who wanted just to get a whole Finnish side.
Well, we spoke to some of the players at the end of the split. Like, I think we spoke to Kevo about a week later, and he'd been contacted by ENCE, like basically as soon as the season ended, and that was fine from our end. Like, we allow players to explore their options straight away. So we asked him like, "Oh, what are the chances of you playing here next season?" And he was like, "I really don't think you guys can afford it." And then when we heard what they were offering him, we were just like, "Yeah, no."
I think so. did you say that then it was kind of like harder in the NLC to kind of create a roster? Because you've got some
Well,
relatively
yes
big
and no.
sides.
It was just, it wasn't. It's always a hard off season at Barrage. Like the off season is always difficult. Like if you ask Jeff or any of the others involved, like Sirs or Alex, they'll tell you like the off season is hell for us. Like because we're constantly competing with bigger orgs, and like when we find players, we have to keep it quiet. But one thing that's really really tough, but you can't really control, is if you bring players into trial and then they get trials from orgs which can offer more, they'll say, "Oh, I really really like this player that was trialing with Barrage," and then they get picked up there as well. So it is hard. Like I wouldn't say we necessarily had a harder off season this off season, because I remember that the off season where we were putting together for spring was also really really difficult. And it always is when you're operating on small budgets, and even still, like when you're on higher budgets, it's difficult because you're competing for higher tier players with other orgs that are competing for the same higher tier players.
Yeah, I feel like when it, unless you're kind of like XL and Fnatic, who are basically signing the 2-3 year deals because they can sign,
Yeah, of
those long
course,
term
and you
deals.
have that academy
Yeah.
back in as well. Yeah,
Yes, but like even with like Nordavind and stuff like that, even though they're working on a bigger budget, it's majority of the time it's probably not on like major long term contracts, or at least not all of them would be. So there's
probably
still
not
even
more than a year. No.
yeah. So it's still kind of that, if they play very well, they could move on, and you've always got to kind of
Hmm.
keep an eye out with what this rotating pool is, which is the one thing the ERLs kind of lack. Past, I mean, I think in Spain they're okay with it, and a bit in Germany, but there's not much long term planning I see right now. Sometimes from ERLs, which I think lacks in other regions as well.
I
But
think
that
it'd
just
be
might be a side.
different if the ERLs were the top tier of play,
Mm,
but every player has aspirations of breaking into academy and breaking into
yeah.
the LEC, and you see a lot of orgs who, yes, they don't necessarily can't build for the long term, but you look at orgs like Big Clan and how many players they've
Mhm.
moved on to the LEC. Um, there are some orgs that just keep at the top level because they have the resources to keep bringing in new
Yeah.
fresh players and a good scouting network. And I think that in itself, the background staff is what keeps an org afloat more than anything,
Mhm.
because they're more mainstays in the organization than the players. So that's where the majority of the building comes from. And the more
Yeah.
time they work together, the better they get at it.
I was going to say one example was Mouse, but Mouse aren't doing very good right now. So I guess like that's a
Mouse,
bad
Mouse
thing to
is a
say.
Mouse is a tricky one though,
Yeah.
because they had the leader thing. So
Mm.
yeah.
Why don't you talk us through a bit then about the players you did get? Well, stop talking about the near misses.
Okay, yeah, sure. I'm quite happy with the roster and the way the roster's progressing at the moment. I know that there's a lot of unheard names, and we're like this D tier roster that people seem to be putting us in the tier lists, and that could be warranted come the end of the season. Who knows? But I think it's similar to last split. Like I'm sure Tom knows very well that
Yeah. Yeah.
we've got a lot of unknown players, and that
Mhm.
ends up with you being put low down in the standings in tier lists at least. So, there's a lot of players that I'm very, very excited about. I think the solo laners that we picked up are very, very good, and not many people know too much about them either. Um, I think obviously our bot lane is probably the one where you look at and you say like, all right, DenVoksne Nightmares, I know who those guys are.
Mhm.
They have a good bot lane. Um, and the jungler Flipper is one of the most vocal junglers I've seen. Um, yeah, I was happy with the build in the end. I'm not gonna lie, like when we brought them into the scrims for the first time, there was like no synergy at all because they'd never played with each other, and it was it was new environments for all of them, so it was a bit rough. But I think definitely in the build up to the Fnatic game, we started to see it clicking a little bit
Mhm.
more, and they put up a good fight against Fnatic, I feel. But yeah, they're a team that's getting better with each scrim. They're spending a lot of time working really, really hard to get better. And obviously, when you've got good backroom staff like Surza, we've got Deos helping out now, and we've got Alex, AJ helping out as well. It's just a good foundation for players that don't necessarily have as much comp experience to grow into competitive players. And that's what we're slowly starting to see, I think.
and it's really like, so you can look at it from two ways with kind of the Barrage, with what's happened so far. You can look at it as 0-2, but then I look at actually who you faced, and I'm like, to be fair, it's a bit unfair to really say,
I
like,
think
compared to other sides.
I think yeah. I looked at the schedule for the start of the split, and I saw the first like the group that we were putting for a start, and I was like, okay, so we're in the harder group, but it's like, and the more I looked at it, I was like, okay, so it's a harder group, but we can finish higher up. But the form
Yeah.
that Tricked are in at the minute, like they look very very sharp, and I do like quite a lot of their players in fairness. But like your opening game is Fnatic, and you've got Munster in game 3, and obviously
Yeah.
they're the two best teams on paper. Trick look really really good at the minute, and then we have Eminem and Dusty, who are probably the two teams that we would, remove ourselves from the group. We'd look at and would say these are probably the two weaker teams in the league, and we've got them after a really hard start. But the players and the coaching staff understand that.
Mm.
And one thing I'll say about the roster is they bounce back really, really well. Like, yes, we're 0-2, but no one's defeatist or concerned. People are saying like, it's okay, we'll pick up wins eventually.
Yeah, and it's not like, and I don't want to flame like another side, but I look at it kind of like with Team Singularity, for example, like there was clear problems which you could see from the
Yeah.
outset of that, and it was problems which looked like, okay, these problems need to get worked from, and I think they have slowly worked on them, and I think they will get to that point. It was a different story from that group than what it is, I think, in this group.
Well, there's three teams I'd look at in Group A and say like, okay, we could easily finish above them by watching them play. Which would be probably ENCE, Singularity, and Godsent. But in fairness to Godsent, I thought that they'd probably not win a game, and they're doing really really well.
I have this theory about Godsent. I think that they have like a special ability to make other teams play bad. Like I don't know. There's just this thing. I don't know if it's just because other teams, because obviously there's been so much being said about, oh, this side's been like picked up last minute. Oh, it's just a group of friends. It's just blah blah blah. That when they actually go down, they just get tilted. But it just like genuinely, it feels like some of those plays which I'd seen in those Godsent matches. I've never seen those players like do those flashes or flash forward, or who was it? Was it DenVoksne who flashed forward I think it was against Godsent, and I was just like, to try and get a kill, and he just missed it completely, and I was like, what is? I've never seen a player like ENCE so bad at that point. Yeah,
I mean, Godsent's a weird one because they can play without pressure, can't they? Everyone was tipping them to get relegated. Like they weren't even supposed to be in the league as players. Like the org was obviously, but these are players that got picked up from the Danish league like last minute because Seaboy had said to me like all off season that he was going to play in the Danish league this season with his friends, and that's why we didn't push for Seaboy. But then all of a sudden they're picked up for the NLC last minute, and they can go in and play without pressure. They weren't supposed to be there. Any win that they take is a bonus for them. But then to take down someone like Riddle, who were looking like on par with the academy teams after beating XL the day before, that is mental. But I think it is that ability where they know they're the underdog and they're just happy to be there. Like they can go in and, like you say, they can just play how they want, and without pressure, they're just having a good time as friends. I've seen there was an org called Random Five in Bulgaria that were playing in the Balkan League, and no one tipped them to do well, and they won the league just because they were a group of friends and they were enjoying playing together. And then I think that's what we're seeing at Godsent. I don't necessarily agree with the way Godsent recruited, but
it's just what's happening.
It is what it is. Yeah.
Going back to though with your roster, like how much was DenVoksne going into it? Because I look at DenVoksne and I think that this guy's like, obviously it might just be biased because of UK team, but I look at him and like he's like the player like DenVoksne Nightmares, because like you said, it's I would say arguably, just from me personally, I think it's like the strongest in your side. But it's interesting to see that it's kind of not. It's not what I expected from DenVoksne right now in the nicest way possible. Like, why do you think that is right now? Because I think I looked at some stats, and obviously it's only 2 games, so you take stats with a grain of salt. But I think it was I think Nightmares had he'd only died once, and yet then DenVoksne is also playing quite passive. Is that kind of just a synergy reason, or do you think that would just eventually improve?
Look, it is only 2 games, and it's 2 games against 2 of the better teams in the league.
Yeah.
Like, this is a different step up in terms of the level of play for both players really. Nightmares coming out of the Benelux, which
Mhm.
is a weaker region, and DenVoksne, you know, the Nordic League last split isn't necessarily the strongest. But I think for DenVoksne, it's him settling. Like it's a different environment to what he's used to, because he's used to being on teams with friends, and this is the first split where he's been picked up by a team on his own. You know, yeah, in scrims he's doing really really well, and so is Nightmares. But obviously, like from the two games we've seen, like you know, we haven't seen that wow factor from DenVoksne in those two games like we saw with him on Demise or him on Vipers. Um, but he is settling. Like it took DenVoksne a little bit of time to get used to communicating his thoughts with the group because he's used to just doing it in a friendly setting.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, he's settled now, and I think going off scrims, I know I'm the only one here that sees it, but we'll see that pop off factor from
Mhm.
DenVoksne at some point.
And it's interesting when you
Hopefully
said
next game.
that. It's interesting when you said that, to be fair, because you forget that obviously Demise was EJBY Brotherhood, which
Yeah,
essentially was just a group of friends which just went in and got promoted. And so yeah, it's interesting to see how kind of he can kind of go out of his comfort zone as well, and hopefully that develops him as a player as well, because you've
yeah.
got to be a good player, you've got to kind of work with people who you're not best friends with essentially.
Yeah, well, DenVoksne is an exciting player. Like I've been
Hmm.
watching him since he was on EJBY Brotherhood. And after the Demise split, like he was on my list of potential players to sign on. We went with Kevo for the residency,
Mm.
and Kevo was a really good player as well. But obviously the split, DenVoksne was a resident for us, so we we took a long look at him. And we were looking at him with other AD carries, and we went with him because he does have that ability to, you know, solo carry games when you know that's fully in his locker to do so.
Did you
Um,
did you look at the roster and think, did we need a British person in? Obviously, because with Barrage being a British org, was that something you had to consider? Because I know
But
that sounds silly, but
yeah, we wanted to go. We did want British players in there, but I wasn't going to bring in British players that weren't good enough to play in the
mm,
league. And I think all of the British players that are in there, except for maybe like I mean Prosper's probably like the only one that's teamless at the minute. Um, I thought, you know, we've got to build a team that works, not a team that
yeah.
fits the brand. That's it would have been nice to have 5 British players if they were all good enough,
Hmm.
but from the British players, you know, we did want some of the British players. They ended up going to other teams, and from the British players that were left, I didn't think that there were any in the positions that we needed that were better than their Danish or Nordic counterparts.
Mm.
And at the end of the day, like it's a cutthroat league. You know, we got 10 games. I can't risk bringing in a rookie UK player, and it go badly and then us get relegated. So
Yeah.
I decided to go with Nordic talent that I could count on a bit more.
Mhm. Just going back to DenVoksne a bit, was there a thought to try and get? I don't know if I'm saying it like an idiot, but Bebop Booley, was there a thought to bring him as like with the pre-existing synergy, or did you try and think to get him with someone maybe a bit more experienced like Nightmares?
Uh, I like Bebop. We did trial him, and obviously he ended up going to Nordavind anyway. But I wanted a support which was a bit more of a veteran
Mm.
as well. And I've worked with Nightmares before, and I know what I'm getting with Nightmares. I think Nightmares fits the team really, really well as a leader. I don't necessarily think that Bebop Bully is a leader, but that's mainly because he's a bit more of a rookie, though he is very mechanically talented, and I think that suits Nordavind because I think they have leaders in other positions, like you've got
Hmm.
Mummus, you've got Nolte, you've got even Ericsson's quite vocal. Chris Berg's been around for a long time, so that is an ideal roster for Bebop Bully, you know, a more of a fresh support. Um, whereas with us, we've got players like Dreedy, Jadran, you know, more rookies. So we needed a support who can lead a team, and that's why we went with Nightmares.
Mm.
Fair enough. And something you mentioned as well was about this schedule of is it tricky then? Because obviously there being there being the two groups, that
Yeah,
means that there's not a huge amount of games to play. So we've ended up in this scenario where some teams only play like once in a week,
yeah,
and then 2 times next week. Obviously, you guys have only played once per week so far,
yeah.
and as we mentioned, this against stronger sides. Does that make things more difficult to sort of turn it around then? Because I imagine for even trying to sort of generate some momentum, you've had 2 weeks. So essentially, by the time the next games roll up, it would have been 3 weeks since the first game, and you still only played twice.
I'm not a big fan of a 10-game off season, a 10-game regular season. Like, I think that's way too little, especially when the bottom team can get relegated. Like, it doesn't give you time to ramp up. It doesn't give you time to work with the players. I mean, I'm not a big fan of a split by split basis anyway, because by the time the players have gotten better, you're shipping them out the door because the contracts are finished. So a 10-game regular season is bizarrely short. I liked the ESL format when they did the groups. This is going way back. I think this is like 2018 spring, where you played every team in your group twice and then every team in the other group once. And that would have been something I would have liked to see, because I think a 16-game regular season is very reasonable. Like the UKLC was 14. What's 2 more games? But we've got what we've got. We've got a 10-game regular season, and it is like you say. Like if you lose momentum, like if you go 0-4 in your first few games, like you're almost halfway through the season, and it's only been like 2-3 weeks. And yeah, it is a bit harsher on teams. Like I'd say Fnatic have a massive advantage just through being together. Like some of those players have been together for years now. Like how is that fair to have such a short season on teams that have only been together like 2 weeks prior to the start of the split? It makes a huge difference.
Because you wonder actually if they did something like that where you had like that one extra round at the end, they could even just not have. Basically just have every team play twice a week, and then you'd probably end up more or less reaching that anyway. I guess it's just scheduling and I don't know, having
it's
longer
a very
broadcasts
weird
and stuff.
concept having games in hand as well. That's something I've not had before, because M&M have played 3 times and we've only played twice. We play them this week, but we play Munster on the Tuesday and they can watch our game, and then we go in off the back of whatever result we get against them into the M&M game on Wednesday. So there's some form of momentum that goes through as well. So it's just such an odd concept.
And I think as well is just from a selfish point, when we were doing the podcast for week 1, we were like, well, we can analyze like half of the league, but we can't really analyze like teams who have played one game. It was like, well, we're going to see what they do next week at this point.
You're doing it with DenVoksne though, over 2. So.
But the thing is though, is that so what you're saying is you prefer the tower format is essentially what we're getting with this.
I mean, I'm not a big fan of the current format, but I can live with it in comparison to the tower format. Because the tower format was the worst thing I've ever seen in League of Legends, 100%. And it had to be the UK League where it was.
I can understand with this league, like the frustration though with 10. I think it does make it a little bit better, the fact that there is essentially 8 playoff spots. There's only one. There's 2 teams which don't get there in the end, and so it just sucks for the relegated side. But then I would also say it's not like you're relegated automatically. You're in a promotion relegation kind of thing, and then
I would tip that if you fall into 6th place that you're not coming back. I've just got that feeling. I think looking at some of the teams that exist in the Swedish league or the Danish league, or even some of the UKLC teams at the minute, if you fall into that slump where you are a team that is beaten and you've come 6th, and you're going up against good teams from the league below that could push for NLC spots, and they're riding the wave of we're doing amazing, it's hard to see a team that comes 6th unless they make changes come back. I think that at least one of the sides will get relegated, like full on relegated, and be replaced with someone else next split. And I think that is a danger that all the sides walk if they fall into the bottom spot in the group.
I don't know how NLC are gonna think about this one, because like the one thing I know it's bad, but I kind of hope that it does happen a little bit just to see what happens. Say if Enclave go through, for example, and then Team Singularity get relegated. What happens to Team Singularity? Do they go into the UKLC then? Because
no, they go into the Danish league, and I think the way it works is that the team that finished bottom of the Danish league would be relegated to make room for Singularity. It's a bit different for the UKLC. unless the academy team also gets relegated. Because if, let's say, Munster, just to throw it out there, they're going to get relegated, but they won't. If Munster got relegated, then they just take the spot of their academy team. So it doesn't quite work like that. But not all of the teams opted into having academy teams in the league below, because everyone was offered to have one. So it's just kind of a unlucky, I suppose, that if you get relegated into another league, let's say a Swedish team replaces a Danish team, then unfortunately, like you get the bottom team in the Danish league relegated to make room for Singularity. Singularity aren't going to play in the Swedish league, are they?
No, yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder what happens then with the UKEL, because the UK scene is the only one which I can think which has like 3 tiers essentially, isn't it?
Officially 3 tiers, yeah. In the Nordic scene, at least, yes. In the Nordic UK scene. I guess it'd just be a knock-on effect, wouldn't it? I'm not sure how promotion into the UKEL works, to be honest. I think they have like an open tournament or something that leads into it. But I guess it would have a knock-on effect where teams have to go down and be put somewhere. So,
which is one of those, isn't it? 'Cause it's the only way they can do it, I think. To be fair.
It is. I to be honest, I don't think it was fully thought through, but it is something they have to do. It's a bit different. Like we have the Conference North and South that feeds into the Vanarama, and they can just move teams about in the UK. But in the Nordic League, the NLC, you have 5 leagues, and you can't just like move teams around from their host country to a different country. So I think it will just have a knock-on effect where, unfortunately, the bottom team just gets relegated. But to be honest, if you come last in your league, it's probably deserved.
Yeah.
Go down.
Again, it's one of those, isn't it? If you're like 0-12 in the Nordics or something like that, I don't know, like not won a game, you can't really then complain that Team Singularity get relegated and you also aren't in that league below, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. To be honest, if it is Singularity that got relegated, it's more likely that a Danish team is going to come up and replace him anyway. So it probably will just work out that one goes one way and one goes the other. But we'll see. I don't know who will get relegated at this point, but Singularity is unfortunately a good bet from that group at the moment.
One thing you said, you sort of touched on there, was about the academy teams. You said that each team in the NLC had the option, basically had the choice whether to have one. Does the league, or does DreamHack or Riot or anyone, do they give like any extra funding for that or anything, or is it just literally off the team's back to just fund an entirely separate team?
We get so in every league the teams get money for partaking in the league, but that comes after. So at the start of the split, you're working on your own budget, and everything that all of the budget for the academy team comes from the org. Like we didn't get any extra funding from DreamHack to build a team, but DreamHack will give us money for being in the league. But that comes after the league is finished and we fulfilled all of our obligations to them. So we opted into having an academy team, knowing that we would have to be the ones that invest into it. We haven't invested a lot into our academy team because the majority of our resources had to get dedicated to the NLC team. But I think it's just nice to have one to try and grow players more than anything.
Yeah, let's with that we'll move on and talk a bit more about that, because the one thing I wondered as well was kind of like you've just alluded to there, was what you kind of had in mind building the team, and it's something we spoke about with Mulgrew last week as well, how it might be a bit different for the academies, and may even be going for different players, because for your Enclaves and Envisions and whatnot, they obviously want to win the league and get promoted, whereas you guys, winning the league would be nice, but it's not necessarily something that's actually too useful in the end. So is it something you were more going just for sort of younger talent, see who possibly could go up into your main roster? Or?
Yeah, so the aim of the academy team is not to win the league. Like if they did win the league, that'd be great. But the aim is to bring in these young players, like the majority of them are teenagers, 18, 19 years old, and just grow them into being better players that could move up and get them a bit more competitive experience. Like I think we have 2 players. I mean, 3, you could potentially count KDO as he didn't do a regular season. That for them, this is their first like proper taste in competitive at the top. Well, I say the top level, but it's now not quite the top level, but like at a high level at least. So you know, it's just about developing the players mainly for the academy team. I think they've had a rough start with 0-4. I think they haven't quite translated. Hang on. I don't know what's going on with my throat today. They haven't quite translated the results that we're seeing in scrims into competitive, which is a shame. But I think it's still that sort of they're new to it. There's going to be nerves. They're just trying to get through a game and trying to win, but it hasn't quite happened the way that we're seeing it in scrims at the minute. Like they are very, very talented individuals. It's just I think it's a classic case for them that once they get one, they'll get a few. Like I think the floodgates will open for them. But the aim is just bringing them up to a level where they can potentially move up into the main roster at some point.
And I think that's why I really like about the UKLC as a whole, because you've kind of got these two different approaches. And it's no surprise that you do kind of look at the table. I mean, apart from Bulldogs, really, but you kind of look at the table and you see like, okay, these are the sides which actually are organisations which their aim is to win this league and to try and win Pelion Masters and get through. And then you've got the academy sides where obviously while the results aren't great, like there's still obviously parts of development, and even through like little things you can learn, and even sometimes losses, going in lost streets like that.
Yeah, definitely. You look at orgs like Enclave in London, and you look at some of the players they brought in, like Only Angel, Shogun, or London with Chimera and Warden. These are seasoned players, and they paid a lot of money to get them. But those aren't players that were on my radar for the academy team at the start of the split. Like I am not interested in players that I think are at their peak of their careers or established in the UKLC. I'm looking at players that I think, this player's raw and has the ability to have a higher ceiling than some of these players in the future. So, like I say, our aim isn't to be like at the top of the table. It would be a nice byproduct, but being realistic, like we're taking players that need work. And we're working on them to make them into better players. And to be honest, if we end up making them better players, like that for me is fulfilling. Losing is going to be a byproduct of that learning experience for them, which is why I'm not concerned about the academy team or their position. It's just about working on them as players. Like obviously they want to win the split. I mean, naturally that comes with playing competitive. You want to win every game, but for us, it's about working on those players and bringing them up to a new level. And that was the aim with the academy project. We brought in players under the age of 20, 21, that we can see having a bigger ceiling than some of these established players that are now 24, 25 and have done a lot more in their careers. So it's about taking these rookies and shaping them for the future.
Yeah.
And it's funny to see that kind of at this level, like people saying in like in NA where they've got their academy and half the academy team's just filled with just players not good enough for the for the LCS. And even in the ERLs,
culture.
Yeah, even in the ERLs we can understand that it's actually a better use to not do that, because even for them they can't get promoted or anything, so it's
the North American culture is very different. It's a lot more friend based over there, unfortunately. Like I talked to Ian about it quite a lot, and the reason that NA does so poorly is because they don't have an infrastructure like we have in EU, where we can constantly keep pumping out talent. The buck stops at the NA Academy, which is basically a recycling ground for retired players for a lot of orgs, because their aim is not to develop players, they just want results, and that is a wrong usage of an academy team. That is not what you should be trying to do with your academy setup. You should be trying to push through new talent. Or, I mean, you can revitalize old talent in a good system, but I don't see that happening in NA.
And the reason do that in ERLs as well. Like
exactly, you can do that in ERLs.
For example, obviously it's not done great for him, but he went to an ERL, he transitioned and he changed.
Well, the ERL is an organic machine which can keep the talent strong. for EU, and that's just something that isn't there in NA. Like NA has 20 teams, and then it's the NA amateur circuit, which is just a mess. In EU, I'd hazard to guess how many teams we have. Like, if you combine the LEC and the NLC, that's more teams than the LCS and the LCS Academy put together already. So that's why EU is constantly churning out talent, and that's why NA is struggling as a region, is because we keep on pumping out more talent through the ERL structure and below.
I also
We
think
have
as
a
well.
lot more competitive ability for players.
I also think as well. There's not that ladder. Obviously, there's no like physical progression between LEC and ERL. Like there is like a little gap between, and it's just through promotion or through the
Yeah.
academies. But they have like a collegiate system, which is I actually think quite good in America. But it seems that they become good collegiate players, and then they just never get picked up, and then that's it. There seems to be
Yeah.
such like a barrier between collegiate and NA Academy, which I think is like the biggest issue.
Well, there's nothing in comparison to EU Masters for them. At least in EU, you have something to play for. Like EU Masters is a prestigious competition. It is the best competition outside the LEC, and that is where a lot of talent gets picked on to move on to the LEC, and the fans know that. There's nothing like that in North America. You have NA Academy. No one cares. No one cares about that really. You won
And
NA Academy. Woo, good job. Let's go again. But like EU Masters is exciting. It's something new every time. There's always different winners, and there's always new teams that come in and are like, "Oh, this team looks good. I've never heard of them, but they look really, really good."
and it helps with the promotion as well, because the LEC, like they recently did like look at these players, all of these players have been in EU Masters, and it's kind of like, oh look, these are players which have come through EU Masters. If you want to see the next talent, look at EU Masters, and then that could then drive obviously down below and lower, but majority of people just watch EU Masters, but still get those people on that platform is good. You don't see kind of like in LCS saying, oh, here's like Blabber, who was first in scouting grounds, which he was one of the, but they don't mention that because it's kind of like, he's just there, he's just Blabber at this point, because they do have success stories.
I mean, I'd scrap scouting grounds if I was North America. I would. What I'd do is I'd throw in the academy teams with a few of the NA amateur orgs and just try and get something going there that's breeding talent. But I think scouting grounds is rubbish.
Because don't they even have like so many rules that stop people from playing in it? So it's like, I don't remember what the exact example was. There was a Reddit thread, I think in the last week or so. I don't know if it was like even like a collegiate player or something, like because they played in some tournament meant they weren't eligible for scouting grounds, and they were like the pretty much one of the highest ranked players like on the ladder in NA that hadn't been in LCS, but they couldn't play in it because they played in some other tournament already.
Yeah, the only thing holding NA back from being a good region is NA, and that's it. Just the way they're set up, especially with the server being in Chicago and then playing the professional games in Los Angeles. It's just very mind-boggling. And they have an LA culture as well, where they're all friends with each other, so that's why people keep getting recycled between the teams.
Yeah.
It's a doomed region, unfortunately.
Do you think there's ever a point where kind of NA look at? So obviously this isn't happening, but I kind of look at Dusty, for example, and I look at Vega V2O, and I kind of look at it and I think, well, he's also working kind of with TSM Academy, and I'm like, do you think there's obviously without it being said, but is that kind of like TSM looking at, oh, let's have a look at kind of these ERLs without actually having a team in EU, but kind of branching out to scout other regions in the ERL?
I mean, NA's been doing that for years, haven't they? They've been bringing players over from EU and trying to shape them, but then EU just churns out a player that ends up being better, because if you go over to North America, I believe at the minute it looks like your growth gets stagnated by the NA culture. And then players overtake you in EU because of the ecosystem that EU has. I would love the opportunity to go over to North America, get my hands on an org, and try and revitalize it and shape it like we do in EU. And I think like quite quickly that would become the best org in North America. Like the only orgs that truly care about talent and shaping talent are Team Liquid and Cloud9, and they're the two orgs that are consistently doing well. It's not a surprise. So I think that NA just needs a complete overhaul, and I don't think we're going to see that until players start retiring that should have retired 2 years ago. and the results at Worlds are constantly bad. I mean, they're already constantly bad, but like the penny will drop at some point. I think Riot needs to help them out to build an infrastructure like the ERLs have organically made. Like Riot is quite lucky that the system in EU kind of was forced upon them by countries just building their own leagues or conglomerates. They don't have that in North America, and that's why North America is the way it is.
We had in the chat, Psychic Pete said, what do we think of having a salary cap on the league? I think that was reference to earlier talking about the NLC, but even in NA, that might be something that would help them. Like, if you got Hooney sitting around when he was on, I think that his contract might have changed now.
Yeah.
But after he's left Dignitas and he's gone now to Evil Geniuses for them to stick him in academy for 6 months to get residency and then put him back in as an NA resident. And it's yeah, they need to just have something to prevent just nonsense like that.
It's potentially something you could do at the top level where it makes sure that everyone's on an even playing field. If you were to try and do that at the ERLs, it'd make everyone skint because there are some orgs which just can't offer much at all. So I don't think it's something you could do at an ERL level at the minute because there's just not enough funding with some of the organizations to cap them. Because if they capped every team at the same amount of money, you know, there'd be players probably only on about €200 in some leagues, which is just not enough for an ERL team.
And I also think, like, for me, if an org in ERLs is willing to spend a lot of money or has, you know, built their brand enough where they have the ability, you know, or the sponsors to spend it. So like, you know, Nordavind, for example, you know, or some of the Prime League sides. I don't see why shouldn't players benefit from that? Why should it be limited
Well,
to
I
kind
mean,
of like, you know?
You say benefit, but you know they're just paying full-time wages. Like
Yeah.
I guarantee you, like Nordavind is probably paying about as much wage as you would work in, I don't know, Kellogg's or something. If you're getting paid about £1,000 a month to play, you know that's still not a massive wage.
Yeah.
That's enough for you to live on and get by, and you can dedicate your time to league. You know that in comparison to what some of the other leagues are spending, some of the other teams are spending, is still quite a lot though, and that's because there's not huge amounts of money in esports, especially at the ERL level, but like there's enough for some teams now in the NLC to pay their players full-time wages, and that's great. There's a lot of part-time teams, like Barrage is a part-time team, but you know, you can't really cap players from being able to have full-time wages just because other teams can't afford it. That just doesn't seem very ethical to me, but it does put, you know, it is an uneven playing field in the NLC. Not necessarily in the LEC so much, but definitely in the NLC.
Yeah, because you've got the academy sides, and obviously you could probably look at the academy sides and you'd probably say the wages are probably a lot better than you know, every other one in the league. But
I mean, the
don't think that
academy
can be
teams
helped.
in Munster, I'd say Munster probably have close to resources that the LEC academy teams do. They're probably just like, let's say the academy teams at S tier and then there's Munster.
Yeah.
They are able to offer a lot more than say Barrage or Singularity or M&M. And it isn't an even playing field. Like we have to wait for them to do their business before we can do ours, and that's as simple as it is. Like we need to pick up what players they haven't.
That's why we didn't have Max Law on Barrage.
No, apart from that rumor that I woke up to one day saying that we were getting Max Law, which was news to me.
Well, it was web 3, wasn't it? It was like Max Law and Hive, and then it was like it suddenly said like, oh, these are going to a Munster, and it's like, oh, but suddenly Barrage is. I'm like,
yeah, I think
what?
it's because they didn't know what our roster was, so they're like, oh, maybe Barrage can take them. And it's like, well, I don't have a spare $5,000 laying about to pick up all these players per month. Like, yeah, I don't know. I do know that the players were disgruntled on Munster. There was some friction over a player decision, I think, and they were looking at options, but I think they sorted it out in the end, obviously. So that's where that rumor potentially came from.
Fair enough, and I think let's move on to some predictions then before we start to sort of wrap up the episode. I desperately need to make up some points. I had an absolute awful week last week.
What did you get last week? Was it? Was it last week?
It might have only been 3 points. It was a Tom score I got last week.
Yeah.
So if you haven't been keeping up for me, we've made things a bit more interesting in this split. So each week we do a match of the week that's worth 2 points instead of 1.
Okay.
this one it's Riddle against Nordavind. But that's the third game on day one. We'll get to that in a minute. The first game on day one is Dusty and Fnatic. I think that's
Yeah.
quite a comfortable one. I've gone for Fnatic. Obviously, I think they. Oh no, they beat Munster last week, didn't they? So they'll be on a high. Potentially could be overconfident. Who knows? But yeah, I don't see Dusty winning that one.
I think Fnatic will take it. I haven't seen Fnatic roll anyone yet,
No.
but I think Fnatic will take it against Dusty. Yeah.
I think from the small like pool size, I do think Fnatic do look better than what they did last split in terms of they've had time. They've clearly had time to look things through. And I mean, I wouldn't say better in terms of like they 3-0 XL better, because I think that was like what peak Fnatic Rising could have been at that point. But yeah, I don't know what to think about Dusty. Dusty's the one anomaly because I don't really know much about them. And I said that they were going to lose to Tricked, and then all the analysts on the NLC in the first week said that Dusty were going to win. And I was like, well,
don't listen to the NLC analysts.
I was like, what's this?
But most of them are casters who don't know what they're talking about. They just go with, I recognise this player. They're going to win, and that's it. Yeah, I think Fnatic are a team that scale throughout the season. Like, I think Dan, as much as I hate to say it, I think he doesn't necessarily want to be playing in the ERLs. I think he feels he should be playing in the LEC. So he kind of ramps up for playoffs where it gets a bit more competitive. So he sort of lays dormant in the regular season, although he has put in 2 really good performances so far. But going off the UKLC, he does sort of remain dormant for the regular season, and then we see a true Fnatic come out in the playoffs.
I think that was since it kind of was it Rift Rivals when they kind of said that here we'll give Dan like a little shot.
They put him in because I think there was friction with Broxer, wasn't there? And Dan is a good jungler, like he is very good and could be playing at the LEC level. But ever since they've switched to self-made, Dan's chances of getting into the starting lineup have gone down. So he's kind of stuck in his contract playing for Fnatic. But he might be fine with it. He might be completely fine with it. Like he's doing well in the ERLs, and Fnatic have done consistently well with him. But he is definitely a player that ramps up for the back end.
So I go Fnatic Rising as well. I'm not going to go Dusty.
Dusty are a strange team. I think their best attribute is probably their coach, but there are some good players on there.
The next game we have is yourselves, Barrage against Munster.
Yeah.
Sorry, Froomie, I'm going for Munster.
Yeah, that's fine.
Sounds like you almost agree.
No, I don't actually. I would have said, arguably, that we both played against Fnatic. We haven't played against M&M. Obviously, Munster looked really good against M&M, but so has everyone. I'd say that we looked better against Fnatic than Munster did.
I would agree.
And I've been talking to Surza, and Surza says that there are weak points, which I'm not going to share because that would be tipping our hand. Like Munster are susceptible to being beaten. Like they have weak points. We have a plan to necessarily try and exploit that. I'll give credit to Munster. Like they're very, very good players, and they have a good staff as well. Like it's going to be a tough game, but I think there is a world where Barrage takes it in a best of one. For sure. So I'm going Barrage. What's the prize?
So I do agree with you. I think that you definitely fared better against Fnatic Rise, and I think it's weird with Munster because it is kind of gauging like, okay, maybe there was a lot of hype early on. I think in the long run, this whole roster could work out to be very, very good. But obviously they very easily beat M&M. And then they struggled against Fnatic. And so it's kind of like, well, where do they balance right now at this point?
Munster. Yeah, go on, sorry.
I would still give it to Munster.
Oh, have we lost Tom?
Look at the game.
Oh, there we go.
Oh, we lost you for a second, Tom.
Oh, sorry. I'm going to give it to Munster. I think if a lot of people look at the game just from the scoreline, they'll think, oh, Munster probably going to do it quite easy if you look at the players. But I don't think it's going to be an easy game. And I think this will be one of those games where it could go either way, I actually think.
Like, they have class players. Like, it's obvious. Like, Shikari, class. Maxilon, class. Sebex. Well, He was the one that we were thinking probably was the one who it was a bit different,
Mhm.
but he's looked very, very good in this team. Unforgiven, I think he's class,
Yeah.
and Heaver is class.
Yeah.
The only thing is, like, Maxlaw and Heaver have taken a bit of time out from playing. Like, Heaver was a sub last split for Origin, and Maxlaw was out in the cold after a
Mhm.
pretty poor split with Misfits where it went completely kaboom, didn't it? Like, I don't think we're seeing them at their best yet. I don't know if they will get back to their best, but Heaver is a very intelligent player, and Maxlaw obviously is a
Mhm.
big name, and he's played against some of the best players in the world. Um, I can understand why you're tipping them to win.
Yeah.
You know, they're a very good team. And Fern is a coach who, for me, works well with good players. He doesn't necessarily work well at growing players, but he knows how to utilize tools that are,
Mhm.
fully functional. Like with good players, Fern can work with them very, very well. So he's got a good team for him to work with. So yeah, I think Munster will definitely be one of the teams that's up there come the end of the season, but I don't think they're invincible. I
Yeah.
think that they can lose to teams, and we
I
could
think
see a Godsent versus Riddle come out.
I think I do agree with you with kind of coaching with Ferndog. Like the other examples I'd look at like Pad, and I think that he's really good at kind of getting the best out of the players which he has, and he's
Hmm.
good at kind of getting finding these players who maybe aren't the best in the league, but will emphasize their positives and do very well at that. Where I think Ferndog, when he's given like a really strong roster, knows
Yeah,
how to keep them at their peak at that time.
Fern works well with the tools he has. If he
Hmm.
has bad tools, I think he struggles. I think that was evident on Barrage in 2019, where Fern was a big part of our staff, and he couldn't get the players going. But then when he works with teams, when he works with players which are established and strong, Fern excels very, very well
Hmm.
there. Like he knows how to use players that know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Like he can lead the horse to water, to be honest, but
Hmm.
it's up to them to drink with Fern. Um, but this is a team that suits Fern very, very well, where the players are strong in their individual roles, and he can get the best out of good players.
I think he's going to be disappointed this week though, because now that Tom's voted against Barrage, then that means that they're just going to win. So
Oh yeah, that's
Didn't he
it.
vote for Trick last week?
Uh oh,
I have to
I
double
can't.
check.
I can't remember. I think I did because I think I won every single round pretty much last week. So that's
Apart
pretty
from the
good.
Godsent one, yeah.
Apart from the Godsent one, but you know what? Oh, Mulgrew was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna go for it." Yeah, and they gave this reason, and then literally a bit behind the curtain, he literally messaged us straight after saying, "Yeah, I'm just trolling with this Godsent." Like literally straight after.
I don't think anyone could have predicted that Godsent were going to win, so, fair play for doing it. What a genius.
All right, then we go to the match of the week. Riddle against Nordavind. I think it's a tough one to call. I'm going for Riddle because I think after that Godsent game, they'll have to they're gonna properly switch on, because they obviously beat XL, probably got overconfident, lost to Godsent, so now they've got that kick up the backside where we've seen that they can beat basically anyone at this point now. If they can beat XL, they should be able to beat anyone. And yeah, I think that the Godsent game will be a wake-up call for them, so I think they'll be properly up for it. So I'm going for Riddle for that one.
Nordavind. Nordavind are going to win. I'm quite close with Hansen. I think he's a fantastic coach, one of the best in the league. I'd say he's a better coach than Smeagol. I just really like the roster they have in comparison to Riddle's. I think Riddle is solid, but Hansen told me at the start of the split that Nordavind are going to be better than Riddle, so I'm gonna back him on that one because I believe him. Yeah, I'm going with Nordavind, and I've got to back Ericsson, of course. He's a top player, so
I
Nordavind for
mean,
me.
you've got to back Ericsson. I've got to back Mummus, so I'm definitely going for Nordavind. I think I'm gonna
Yeah,
genuinely vote Nordavind every single time.
that top lane matchup is going to be mad. I think
Yeah.
both Mummus and Doxy are very similar players,
Hmm.
and they're both very, very good in their own right. So the top lane matchup for Nordavind versus Riddle is going to be. I hope it's hypey, but you watch it be like tank duty now for both of them, and it's just boring. But
I,
two very good sides.
I think it's very interesting as well, especially with the way that the group's kind of gone out. This Riddle should have been 3-0. Like if you look at that group, but now you've got 4 2-1 sides.
Yeah,
You've got XL now who are a bit like what's happening. Like, not what's happening, but they tasted defeat, which kind of I think would have shocked them at that point, even despite it being a Riddle. I think they would have more. Would really? Do you not think so?
I don't think XL care one bit. I don't think they care at all. They know they're going to be in the playoffs, and them losing that game to Riddle, they probably just went, "All right, lads, where are we going for tea?" I don't think they'll care one bit about that loss. I don't think it'll affect them in the slightest, and I think that obviously they'll win more games than they lose.
Not that they'll take it a little
they'll
bit more
go into
seriously,
playoffs.
considering they just can't seem to win it. Essentially,
I think
Right.
they go into every game expecting to win and do well, but I don't think a loss will phase those players. I don't think I don't think they'll be like reevaluating themselves too much. I think
No.
they'll be saying, "Oh well, we lost, we'll win next time."
Mhm.
And they have that in their locker. They lost the game, so what? They don't really care. They know they know the season's more than just a game, and
Yeah.
I don't think losing to Riddle will phase them.
Yeah.
Well,
But I'm gonna go for Nordavind just because I do think that actually it's such a close game because I do think there's just good players on each side, and I think it just depends on how. I hate to say it. It could depend on draft, and I hate saying that when it's like, oh, it's win draft, win game, because I really don't think it's on.
I would back Hansen to win in draft.
Yes, and that
Riddle.
exactly. For me, if you've won the regular season with Diabolus, yeah, you probably deserve the upfront on.
Yeah,
the
I really rate Hansen. I think his time I think he did really well with Penguins, but I think the BCN result was like out of his hands because of like the off-field stuff. Like I wouldn't hold the BCN record against anyone because I think that was a tough scenario to be in. Like that was doomed before the split began. But Hansen is one of the best coaches outside of the LEC right now. And I think an org like Nordavind on his home patch suits him down to the ground. And I think the players he's got are what he wants and will work well for him. I've seen what he can do with players. I've seen what he can do with the team, and that's why I'm backing Nordavind to be one of the top teams come the end of the season. And I think Nordavind will take it.
Well, I'm glad you guys have both gone Nordavind, so that when I get 2 points, it's gonna bump me up a bit. That's good.
You'll actually catch up.
Either
to
that
me,
or you're miles behind.
Yeah, one of the two. Don't jinx it.
Yeah.
Then the next game was XL against Singularity. We were saying about XL there, obviously they would expect to win pretty much any game. Given how things have gone so far, I imagine this is the game they expect to win the most. And it's tough for Singularity. Obviously, they've started off with 3 straight losses, and you could argue the opening games they had were probably some of the better chances to actually pick up a couple of wins. So I don't think it's looking very rough for them. I'm obviously going for XL. I wouldn't imagine anyone would be any different.
Yeah,
I'm going with XL.
Don't really need to analyze that one much, to be fair.
Well,
right?
I mean, I love Turok. He's a very good friend of mine, and I think he is a good young coach. But I think the Singularity project. I know there's a lot of good players. Like you look at that roster, and you're talking Flaxish, big history. Skewed has been knocking about for a while, and he performed really, really well in the UKLC and on Singularity last split. Takes it, an exciting young AD carry. I've looked at him. I've trialed him. I think he's very talented. I think I don't know much about Only 35 to be fair. All I know is he played for Dusty last split and they did okay. I don't know what he's like, if he's vocal or what. And then you've got V-Row, who on his day is a class player, but he is a player that is susceptible to tilt, and if he is tilted like he would be in Singularity at the minute, then it's hard to get the best out of him. But on his day, he's a very good player. He is a very good player. They look like one of the most disjointed teams I have ever seen, and I think that XL are just going to dismantle them very, very quickly. And maybe the only thing they've got going for them is they can play without pressure, because it's not a must-win game for them. Like you'd expect to lose against XL, but Singularity, they're probably going to be 0-4 off the back of this result, and it's looking rough from there unless they improve drastically very quickly. But it's a season that doesn't allow for that.
Yeah.
I do think that Torok is a good coach, and I think given time he will actually turn it. I think this side will improve. I don't think they'll be this bad from what we saw from like the beginning. I think there is definitely improvement, which is going to happen. I'm unsure to kind of like. I think there's a lot of people who are kind of writing them off straight away and saying, "Oh, they're going to be the bottom placed side." I don't particularly know right now. I think it's too early to say. Because Godsent could literally never win a game never win a game since, and that means they only need to win 2 other games in Singularity to actually do something. Or ENCE is a bit up in the air as well, so it's definitely not like fair to write them off. I would say there's a few people.
ENCE 1-2 or 2-2 at the minute.
They're 1-2 right now.
Right. Okay. So Singularity are going to be bottom in the end of the first half. Like that's a given.
Yeah.
And if they want to survive, like Godsent are 2-1 already. And then you've got ENCE who are at 1-2. Like they need to hope that Godsent and ENCE drop pretty much all of their games from now until the end, and they need to hope that they get wins off both of them. Like that is how drastic it is. Unless they can pull off a shock win against, say, Nordavind and Riddle, which in their current form they just aren't. They need to hope that ENCE or Godsent just go on a massive tilter. I think that Godsent having 2 wins already could be enough to see them above
because
Singularity.
It's only 10 games. Yeah.
If they lose to ENCE and Godsent, it's over. Like they need to get wins against both of them, at least against ENCE, just to force a tiebreaker. Wait, have they played ENCE yet this time? I don't know.
Yes, they have played. They've played ENCE already.
So who have they got left? Have they got Riddle and XL in this first round robin?
Yes, I believe so.
Right,
yeah.
so that's a hard ask. I mean, for Singularity, they need to hope that the teams around them, which are Godsent and, well, I'd say continue to do poorly, but I wouldn't even say Godsent are doing poorly at the minute. I'd say they need to hope that Godsent fall off and start losing games, and they need to hope that ENCE don't find a run of form. Otherwise, like if ENCE takes a game off Nordavind or Riddle or XL, like magically, Singularity could be in the bottom, like could be 6th. That's just how cutthroat this season is. They've lost games to Godsent and ENCE, and that is terrible for them. That is a disaster. So they need to hope they find form in the second half of the season, or they are buggered.
And they've got like that situation now as well, where they've got 1 game this week against XL, 1 game next week against Riddle, and then so you're talking, and then the week after that they've got Godsent on day 2. So we're talking like since they had an easier game, what should have been an easier game against ENCE, they've then got 3 weeks before they've got another winnable game, and before that game they've got XL, Riddle, and Nordavind.
I think that's not a bad thing, the fact that it's spaced out, because I think it does give Torok a little bit more time to kind of be like, let's try and work things out, because Torok might even look at this and be like, right, well, the next 2 weeks we could go 0-5. So let's try and work on the second half and kind of work through things like that.
I mean, it's a situation Torok's been in before with Barrage in 2019. I hope he learned from that one. So hopefully there are things that he can extrapolate from that split and take into this one that helps his team bounce back. I hope for his sake, because Torok is a good coach. Like, he's a good lad. I really like him. Like, I tried to get him on my staff for this split until he got the Singularity job. I really rate him. I just think it's a hard situation to be the coach of Singularity at the minute. But he is a good coach, so he'll land on his feet regardless of what happens, I think. Young as well, only 18. Done a lot.
Yeah, so we move on to day 2 then. And the first one we have is ENCE against Godsent.
Big game. It is actually a big game.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, obviously both teams it's kind of like a sort of a playoff decider, I guess, because these two you'd imagine would be the ones now with Singularity kind of out of the picture, would be going for that 4th spot. And Godsent have obviously started, slightly better. It was hard for me. I've gone for ENCE because, obviously Godsent, they had that upset win, but I kind of think maybe it is because they were just, a group of mates. Maybe that is helping them out in the first couple of weeks, where maybe they've got synergy and we talked about they've not really got much pressure put on them. But then, as we get sort of more into the middle of the split, I imagine the rest of the team should, by that point have the time to synergize and get to the point where they should be. And yeah, I think ENCE should have had enough time now that they should be able to win it. So yeah, I've gone for ENCE on that one.
massive game, innit? I think if Godsent win, then that is essentially them guaranteed 5th place. And if ENCE win, then that still makes Singularity's case even worse if both the teams that are above them have got 2 wins on them. I'm going to go with ENCE. I think they've got that bit better quality. I think Godsent have looked good in the games they played, credit to them. But I think you say about, like, Godsent are friends and they've all got, synergy. But, this is a full Finnish roster that was formed quite a while before any of the other teams in the NLC. So I think they would also have some sort of synergy. And I look at the players and I think, definitely stronger in top. Jungle's contested. I like Seaboy, but I think Takey is a good player. I think both mid laners are not the best, to be honest, but they're both rookies, so we can see if they grow. I think Kevo is the stronger AD carry than Hoyes. And I think who's the support for Godsent again?
Pedersen.
It's Pedersen, isn't it? Yeah, I think that Sepho is definitely a strong support as well. So I'm going to give it 10. So I think that they've just got better players to win.
I don't know. I'm gonna go Godsent because genuinely I don't know what to think about either ENCE or Godsent at this point.
Yeah.
I don't think ENCE have actually looked that good. I actually agree. I think that synergy, with ENCE should have already been there before a lot of other sides. And I do kind of look at kind of friend groups, and that is more synergy. If you are a group of friends, let's be honest, it does give you a boost. And if you're just people who have got synergy from a professional landscape, obviously there's levels of it, but I just don't know with Godsent anymore. Like this genuinely could be a side which finishes 4th, and it's a side which I think quality wise probably doesn't deserve it from the players. But then the players are proving people wrong, I guess. And there's many times where like you kind of look at players who have had bad seasons and actually they do step up, and in this right environment, anything can happen. Leicester won the Premier League, nobody expected that.
No one expected that. No, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
But yeah, so Godsent, why not?
ENCE is a weird one for me. I think with their resources, they decided to go with the full finished roster, but I think they could have built something better if they didn't want to go with that approach. But they've gone with the national branding. I think it's risky when Finland is quite weak in certain areas in terms of its player base. Like if they would have taken the approach that some of the other orgs did, where they're like, we don't care about nationality, and then they got in a few stronger players in other roles, then ENCE with the resources they got could have been an org that's really, really up there. But because of the players they have, they're one of those teams that you'd expect to see in the bottom half of the table. Don't think relegation worthy by any stretch of the imagination, but it's like that's an org that if it took a different approach could have been higher up the table. But there you go. I think that it's going to be a very, very close game, but I still think that ENCE are going to take it.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, like you said, because they've gone for the branding approach, and to be fair, probably for a Finnish roster, you're not going to get much better.
I think
would say.
The only way you could get much better is if you say got White Knight or Sleeping in top, or
I don't think you were going to get those players. To be quite honest,
I mean, I'm pretty sure that they would have tried hard to get Heaver, but I think Heaver probably opted for the better roster rather than joining ENCE and being in a full Finnish team. But if they would have gotten Heaver and then one of the stronger Finnish top laners, then yeah. The only thing is there's not a lot of mids. Like as soon as I heard the approach that ENCE were going with, I was like, well, Simply's the mid laner. And I knew that as soon as I heard that ENCE were going full Finnish. Like no one needed to tell me. Like Simply was going to be their mid because he's simply the only mid laner. And even then, I think Simply is probably one of the weakest mid laners in the league on paper. He might have a pop off couple of weeks, but on paper, it's probably the weakest part about ENCE.
Well, it's like if you it's like with like no offense to Chimera, but if there was a rule where you had to have a UK mid laner, like the one name which will probably come up would be Chimera, wouldn't it? That'd be like, right, well, which one's Chimera? Yeah, like, Chibs as well.
We forget that he still exists as a sub on Fnatic. But yeah, Chimera and Chibs, like they're decent players for the UKLC. in the NLC, Chimera would struggle. I think he struggled last split in the UKLC, to be honest. Good player, but I mean, I could have picked him up for Barrage, but I didn't ever have that conversation. But like, I think I could have enticed him to come and play in the NLC over playing with London. But we opted to go with a Danish mid laner because the mid lane talent is stronger in Nordic. And that's the reason we did it.
I feel bad for Chibs. I forgot about it. I actually did.
I don't think you should feel bad for Chibs. I think
Oh, I
Chibs
guess,
is well in his element. I think he's loving it. Like, one of the big reasons he wanted to join Fnatic was because of the branding, and that's what he's obviously pushing at the minute.
Yeah.
I wouldn't feel bad for Chibs at all. I think he's loving life right now.
Cool. Let's go for the next game. So, game 2 on day 2 is Munster against Dusty. Tough week for Dusty, I think. Fnatic and Munster.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think it's another loss for them. I've gone for Munster. Another one I think is probably fairly one-sided. I wouldn't imagine anyone's going to go up anything else.
My head is saying that Munster win, and I kind of want Munster to win as well to keep Dusty below us. But I think I'd really like to see it if Dusty won just for the banter. But I'm gonna say I'm gonna go with my head. Oh, it'd just be funny. It'd be really funny. Like, imagine if Munster lost to Barrage and Dusty in the same week. Like, if Munster lost to Barrage and Dusty, it would just be mad. But I think I'm gonna go in my head and say Munster, just because I think it'd be foolish to go the other way. It'd be funny though. Really
I'm going Munster. I think that, to be fair, this week feels a bit like a resurgence kind of week for them, or what could be a resurgence week, in the sense of, like, this could kind of show us, okay, what is Munster? Like, they've lost to Eminem. No, they beat Eminem and then they lost to Fnatic. Like, where are you? What are you, kind of thing? And I think anything other than a 2-0 week actually would be disappointing for Munster, from Munster's perspective. I think they'd look at this
and be...
I think that they would look at this and they think that, like, if we want to kind of, like, because they've branded themselves. I think even Mulgrew came on and said, look, we want to win. Like, this isn't a want to get top 2. They want to win the NLC, and so to do
I think it was very lucky for the staff to be a part of Phelan when they got the Munster news, because they've just it's just sort of landed in their lap that all of a sudden they've got a massive budget, and I think with the resources they have, they would expect to win. I think they're being overly ambitious, saying we're going to go to EU Masters and win EU Masters, because I don't think they're going to make EU Masters. But strong team.
I swear, if it's 2 academy sides,
I think it will be.
Oh no, because I tweeted this out. I was like, imagine being in the Nordics, and you've just got 2 academy sides. Like, if you didn't know,
I still think they're the strongest 2 teams.
If you didn't know this, you would think it's still the UKLC. Like, genuinely, if you're just a casual.
Except one of them's in the playing spots this time.
Like, they've got worse.
No, it's doing us a favour, because then they play more games and there's more viewers.
Or they're like, why is the UK sides got worse?
Realistically, the only teams that can challenge them are Nordavind and Riddle, maybe, and Munster and Barrage. But they're just still the 2 best teams in the division, and that's how it should be, because, like I said, they're the S tier orgs in terms of resources. I was debating with Barnetto, and he was saying, I think Munster are at the same level as our academy, and I was saying, like, yeah, except you've got the name and you've got the ability for players to move up into the LEC through the academy team, and that is a more lucrative option for players to take as a result. They should be the 2 biggest teams in the league, and if they don't do it, then it's a failure on their part if they don't make EU Masters. It's a very different thing for an academy team. Like, at worst, they need to be making EU Masters, because they're 2 of the biggest funded teams in the division. It's up to us and the rest of the orgs to challenge them, but for some of us, like, we're way off pace in terms of what we can offer, and that's why it's not a level playing field. But the academy teams, if they don't make EU Masters, that is a failure of Split. That Split XL lost to Diabolus and didn't take that second EU Master spot. That was a failure. It's a massive success for anyone to take it.
Still can't believe that.
Well, I mean, XL take it with a pinch of salt, because it was their first split being in the LEC. But yeah, that's the only time it's happened. Before that, you had teams like Enclave go into EU Masters before the academy teams existed.
Yeah. Well, speaking of academy teams, then, so we've got Fnatic against Tricked, the next one. And I kind of feel like mine and Tom's roles are reversed now, because Tom, you were always going for spicy picks, and you've been pretty vanilla, I think, with your picks so far.
Well, can you tell where I am in the standings?
Exactly.
Why I'm going vanilla,
Exactly, and I'm bottom, so I'm going for Tricked against Fnatic, because I need to make up points.
I don't think that's a vanilla pick at all. I don't think that's a bad pick at all.
Yeah. To be fair, obviously Tricked are unbeaten so far, exceeding expectations. You know, despite us having been the ones to tip them earlier, we knew stuff that everyone else didn't, I think. But yeah.
But apparently we were biased as well, weren't we? Wasn't it?
Yeah, I don't remember the exact context, but our tier lists were, according to a comment, were a bit biased. But I think that's just the idea of it.
I listened to that podcast and I thought your tier lists were probably the only ones where I went, yeah, that's not bad. That makes sense. It's quite fair. I think
you said right at the beginning.
The only one I thought was when Lee rated Singularity as high as he did. I was a bit like, ooh, that's ambitious.
Well, but to be fair, like tier lists are just their opinions anyway, so it's
just a bit of a laugh that makes everyone really upset with you.
Opinions
and at the beginning, we were very much like at the beginning, we were like, right, we don't know all of these players. Like there are players which we will look at from how they've performed from Leaguepedia, but they could be the best player in that bad side, and we wouldn't really know. Like
I know we're off topic, but if you're going to make a tier list, you have to go into it accepting that you are going to annoy people, and you're going to make people. You're either going to stroke someone's ego and make them like you, or you are going to annoy them because they're going to say like, "Oh, they're deluded. They don't know what they're talking about." And regardless of whether you're right or wrong, people are just.
That's the best thing about it, though. I love it because I'd rather everybody be annoyed than nobody care, because then there's no point in them. So
true. So yeah, Fnatic Tricked. So I'm going Tricked, but it wouldn't be like a huge shock. It's not like Tricked haven't been performing well. So I think Pad's got something up his sleeve, and he'll sort me out and give me some points.
I'm gonna let Tom go first because I want to say.
I'm gonna go. See, Tricked are 3-0 though. Like,
so they haven't played anyone yet, really, apart from Barrage.
Yeah.
Game, but they haven't played like the two highest rated teams in the division. Like they haven't played Munster or Fnatic, so it could just be that Dusty, Eminem, and us are just really bad. And
I'm gonna go Fnatic. I do think Fnatic will win this. I think that Fnatic actually, they may be right now the best side in the league, in my opinion. Just off looking at kind of just because XL lost, and I was a bit shocked by that.
Mm-hmm.
Just going off kind of like how they look, I do think Fnatic actually came into this thinking, okay, they look like a proper, like, fully functioning academy side. And Tricked haven't, like you said, faced anybody massive. Now, this could be one of those games where Tricked win, and then it's like, okay, this does solidify them. And it's a little bit kind of like, trying to see where they go. I think that the top four anyway, Tricked at this point. But yeah, I'll go Fnatic for this one.
See, yeah, like Tricked are 3-0. They haven't played against Munster or Fnatic yet. Fnatic looked good value for money in their wins. Like I think Fnatic still haven't played against Eminem yet. I don't think, or Dusty.
Yeah, it's Eminem and Dusty. Yeah.
Oof. See, I think Trick looked good value for money at the minute, and if I was gonna make a pick that I'd say was spicy, it would be going, I think Trick can beat Fnatic. I wouldn't be surprised if Trick beat Fnatic because I think they do look good value for money. But I'm gonna go with Fnatic. I agree with what Tom says. Like I think they look probably the best team in the league right now, only because XL lost. But yeah, I'm gonna go with Fnatic. I think Fnatic can beat Tricked, but I wouldn't be surprised if Tricked won.
This is essentially this was the biggest debate I think me and Lee have had was, is this Fnatic Trick the match of the week? But because we gave the Fnatic last one, we were like, okay, yeah, we'll give it Riddle Nordavind. It's probably the most debate we've had over a match. Like, is this the one? Because both of those matches are really, really good for the group.
I think with Trick being 3-0, I think if one of those wins was against, say, Munster, then maybe. But I haven't even played Munster or Fnatic yet, so I don't know. I don't know how good they are. Like, I think it's a given that they're probably going to finish third in the group at this point, based on a really good start and them looking good value for money. But until I've seen them play against Munster or Fnatic, then I'm not sure. Maybe Munster could be really bad, you know. I've thought about this. Like Munster have only played against M&M and Fnatic, and I think that's so hard to gauge when you get beaten by the best team in the group and you wallop what I'd say at the minute is, and I hope I don't eat my words come Wednesday, but what is looking like the weakest team in the group at the minute. So I haven't really properly gauged how good Munster are, but on paper, I would say that you'd expect them to be a top 2 team. So
with the this is interesting with the playoffs though.
Yeah.
If one of the academy sides doesn't get like if one of the academy sides finishes third somehow, does that mean that they face each other, or is there a losers bracket so they can still kind of face each other in the
Well,
final?
if you come third, fourth, you start in the losers bracket.
Okay.
So it's the top 2 teams from each group. First from Group A plays second from Group B, and vice versa. And that's how it starts. Like that's how the upper bracket starts. Because if you lose in the upper bracket, you get a second life and you drop down to the lower bracket. But if you're one of the third, fourth teams, so I think it's third place fourth and fourth place third in round 1. If you lose that game, you're out. So it's double elim, but it works on a 2 life system if you finish top 2 in the group.
So we need both academy sides to finish either third or fourth.
If XL finish second and Fnatic finish first, then they play each other. But also, if they finish third or fourth, third and fourth respectively as well, then it's a bit more tense, isn't it?
That'd be good.
But yeah,
we can hope, but I doubt it's going to happen.
Yeah, unless Godsent keep it up.
Oh my.
Then the last game then for week 3 is M&M against Barrage. Probably another, quite another big game. I'm not just saying because you're here, Froomie, but I'm going for Barrage because I think M&M do look the weakest side in that group so far. I think the Monk mid thing hasn't really taken off just yet, and I think until we see that actually come to fruition, then I think they're struggling for now.
Sure, we'll talk about that, but I'll wait for Tom's lock before I talk about M&M.
So I'm gonna go Barrage, because M&M for me, I hate flaming them. I like M&M as an organization. I
love M&M as an organization, and I got a lot of friends there as well.
This is a trash move by them for me, from what it seems like. Because for me, if you're gonna do an experimental thing like put an ADC in mid laner, and if it worked out, but it's not. You've got an academy side. Like I know it really like triggers.
Yeah, let's put Monk mid in academy. I don't think that one would have worked.
I don't know, but I don't think it would have done. But then for me, like you shouldn't be testing things in the NLC like that anyway.
But did they have a choice? That's
the question. But I'm not gonna lie. I'd probably have like Chimera over Monk mid. I'm not gonna. I would have like half of the UKLC over Monk mid. Like Monk looks really bad in mid, and it doesn't help when I actually look at Barcode and I kind of look and during every M&M game I'm like, imagine if Monk was where Barcode was, like, and they had like a mid lane. I look at that and I think that probably would be better. And there might be method to it, and it is definitely a development thing. But I'm against the development thing happening in the top division of the league. For me, it shouldn't be happening, and it probably will get them bottom. And if they get relegated, was it worth the development? I would say no. Like,
okay, right. So
it really annoyed me.
Let's talk about M&M, and I do sympathise with them a little bit. I'm going Barrage, obviously, but I can empathise with M&M's position. I think they are similar to us. They probably have a bigger budget than us. In fact, I know they do. But it's a case where I think being the lower budget teams, you take risks. But I think M&M have taken too many risks with their roster. It might have looked good in the trial phase, and obviously Monk has a pre-existing relationship with M&M from playing for him back in 2018. 2018.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he was very good with Eminem, like as an
Yeah.
ADC. With that.
I know that Aesthetic and Monk are very close friends, and I
Mhm.
know that they were looking to play with each other because we got asked if we'd consider it, but at the time Monk was playing AD. So I'm not sure why Monk has suddenly gone. You know what? I was doing well in Spain. I was doing well in the UK. I was on LDLC. We just came to. I'm playing mid. Like what? You cannot just walk in as a mid laner after playing AD carry. Two very different roles. Two very different roles. You cannot just walk into what I would consider as a top tier ERL and expect to just wail on your opponents. It has looked awful. You watch him dominate us now. You watch
Yeah,
him
yeah,
walk into the Barrage game and whoop us. But speaking objectively, like I'm removing Barrage from the situation, and just looking at Eminem's past games, and it's looked diabolical. And we've been joking around, and I know that Fern said something like it as well, where it's like you live by Monk and you die by Monk, and they have been paying the price, and it's most of their games have looked poor because of Monk's mid lane performances. But he's not the only risk on the roster for me
no.
at all. Um, and Officer Naughty, he talks about him being the one that doing the roster plans, which he is. He was probably put in a tough situation where he needed a jungler like Aesthetic to fill one of the local roles,
Mhm.
and I'd hazard a guess and say that they wanted to have Monk at AD carry, and then late in the day, Monk has probably turned around and said, "I'm playing mid." And Barcode was one of the available AD carries, and Barcode's a good AD carry, so.
Mhm.
But I think it was a risk taking Kalhira after his split on Demise. I think it's a risk taking Kakan. I don't think he's one of the stronger tops in the division. Aesthetic didn't look great value for money when playing for Nordavind the split before. So you can take a risk,
Mhm.
but they have taken about 4 risks on 4 different players. It could still work. Like they could gel later on, but it's not looking very good at the moment.
But the thing is, though, is I do think that with this roster, it was very much set up to lose. I know that sounds really bad, but like kind of like Monk does an okay performance in mid lane, and then there's still that consideration of maybe if they say they're like 1 and 2, which is a
Yeah,
little bit better, you could be like, but then there's still improvements. They could have done this with and changed other things, and then but they're 0-3. They've done bad. Like Monk hasn't looked good. I mean, and I believe wasn't one of the games a Corky as well. So like, even that, I know obviously it's still a champion, which is safer, but it's different mechanics in mid lane anyway. But I just don't like it, and I think it's because I know that Monk is a really good ADC.
he is. He
And
is he was. I don't know if he is after changing, but yeah, he was a very good ADC.
Because I mean, you don't. Obviously, there was things with LDLC, but like he was a major part of why they got to EU Masters in the first place, and it's kind of like, how do you like? The only thing I could think of is it must be his decision.
I
And I
mean,
think
well, there's no way Eminem said, "Do you want to play mid for us?"
exactly.
No way.
Yeah.
I reckon Eminem opted into Monk and Aesthetic because I know that they wanted to play together.
Mhm.
I reckon they opted into Monk and Aesthetic, saying, "Okay, Aesthetic jungle, Monk AD, and then we just get a mid laner from anywhere." And then maybe they didn't like their options for mid lane, and Monk said, "Screw it, I'm gonna play mid," because maybe the mid lane pool wasn't great with what was left. But it is the wild one, especially with how
I don't
good he
think
was
this was
looking.
fair.
Well, what do you do?
I
Does
think
Barcode?
I think
You do
Marco's gonna
not.
go. Unfortunately,
That would be harsh
it would
because
be. It would
Barcode
be.
is playing fine.
Yeah.
If anyone was going to be benched on that roster, it'd have to be Monk. Otherwise, like moving Monk back to AD and dropping Barcode would be so unjustified. And I think it wouldn't look good for Eminem to do that.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I think, who's a mid laner left on the market at the minute? Like Krogson.
Yeah.
Krogson's available. Like, and I think Krogson and Aesthetic are friendly. Like, you could always bring in another mid, but I don't know. I think they'll run with this roster this week. If they end up being, would it be 0-4?
I
Then
think they
they'll look at
they're only
making
playing one.
changes.
Yeah.
Then they might potentially look to change things up, depending. Like, if it goes badly in the game against us for them,
Mhm.
then I think that's when they'll start to panic. But moving Monk to AD and dropping Barcode, given that it had been Monk's performances that have been one of the main issues, like
Yeah.
dropping Barcode would look so bad,
Hmm.
I think. But
No,
I could
I
see it. I
agree.
could see it happening. It's not our decision to make, is it? But
And
like I could see it. It'd just be a shame, I think, for Barcode.
and to put it into perspective as well, after this game, Eminem's next 2 games, I believe, are Fnatic and Munster. So, like, you know, like they do the week and then the week, so they'll play Fnatic. Yeah, they'll play Fnatic in week 4, and then week 5 they play Munster.
Well, I'll lock in my predictions now and say they're going to lose to both. But I
They
think
do
if
have
you're
Dusty after that, but that's too
look,
hard fixture.
another thing is the players on their roster, their mentals are susceptible to being down. Like they are susceptible to tilt. Monk is famously susceptible to tilting, and it's something in the past that we've targeted. I've been on rosters. I think it was Enclave when we were in the UK Masters, which is time ago now.
Hmm.
Like we were playing Monk in a best of 3. All we said was like we need to win one game, and then Monk's tilted and we win the set, and it happened. Like this is a team who's mental, who is susceptible to being down. So I think them being on a bad run of form, like things in camp is probably not great for them.
And
They're probably not enjoying League at the minute.
I think the last point as well is, and it's like the thing is though, is that when I slate sides, it's only because I actually do want them to be good. Like I want every
Yeah,
team to perform well, but there's always going to be sides which are worse than other. Thing is as well is that one thing which I looked at, and I'm not even like I don't have a mind for League of Legends. I'm just the viewer who kind of voices my opinion and stuff like that. To be honest, like, but I look at that and I think, well, why don't you just target Monk all game? Like, just if you know that he's probably one of the weaker members in terms of maybe not in terms of mechanical ability, but in terms of knowledge of the role, you just target him, and it does feel like that's kind of just what's happening. They've just thought, well, we'll just target Monk, we'll just work around it, and then we'll win game. But Eminem then don't really have anything to counteract that, which kind of is the problem, I think.
it's like I said, you can't just walk into a top tier ERL like the NLC is, and just expect to be on par with some of the mid laners like Magi Felix or Hatrix or Ericsson. Like you're not going to be able to compete with them from the offset. So it's a bold move, especially to do in a season where you've only got 10 games. Monk would have been better off doing this in, say, his native region in the Baltics. There, he probably could have pulled it off and had a split there, and then worked his way up as a mid laner. But to do it in the NLC is bold, it's audacious, and somewhat arrogant to think that you can do it. And it makes no sense with what he's given up to try and push for the LEC. Like Monk has always been a big voice for like wanting to push and be one of the best players in the world and push for the LEC and Worlds. And he dropped out of school to do it. And why, when your career is going so well? You've been recruited by Spanish teams. You've done well in the UKLC. You literally just won the LFL. Like, I don't know why he was dropped, but he looked okay. Like, you've literally just won the LFL as an AD carry. Why are you switching to mid lane? Maybe it looks better in scrims. Maybe he's having more success with it in solo queue. But I think it was just a crazy move. And, maybe Eminem pick up. Maybe they do pick up, but I think if they lose the game to us and then have to go against Fnatic and Munster,
Yeah.
you could easily find yourself like 0 and they'd be 0-6, wouldn't they? And you wouldn't have any head-to-heads against the other teams near the bottom end. Like you lost to Dusty, you lost to Barrage. It's a slippery slope. So they really need to hope they get a result against us. I think if they don't get the result against us, then they'll panic and they'll change something. But then they'll be changing something in preparation for the Fnatic and Munster games, and they're going to struggle.
I think it's going to be changing something for those Fnatic and Munster games, kind of thinking, well, if we get a victory, we get a victory, but at least then we can get that change and, get some at least actual competitive scrims of the thing, and then hopefully then with the other games would win. That's probably the way which I would do it, because I think if they know that there's a problem, and to be fair, it might be wise just to go for it. And if you're going to do this development job, there is part of me which thinks, well, just do it. Just, try and see what happens. But obviously, you don't want to get relegated. You don't want to go into that.
I mean, yeah, you don't want to go into the relegation zone. I mean,
No.
like I said, if you're in the relegation zone, it's tough to claw back out of that when there are good teams like chomping at the bit to get in the NLC, especially when your mental will be in the gutter, and some of those players' mental will be in the gutter because they're susceptible to it. You know, maybe it's harsh what we're saying, like they're gonna end up in the bottom. Like you know, like Barrage has issues it needs to sort out. You know, we've had a tough schedule, but you know, if we lose to M&M, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Unless we pull out a victory against Munster, which we probably have the ability to do so, but it's a tough game. But like I say, if they lose to us and then they lose those Fnatic and Munster games, it's a slippery slope from there.
And it
Not
is a shame
undoable,
because, like I said,
slippery slope.
from an organization standpoint, I
Yeah,
really like the branding. I like everything behind like M&M. I like Naughty. I kind of like everybody even in the background of it. It just seems that it maybe just was a decision, and I think Naughty's commented about it, hasn't he? Is that he's responsible for it. He thought it worked, and I think he's realized that kind of it might not have gone what he had hoped for.
well, it's only 3 games in,
Yeah, exactly.
you know, but it's not looked great. But like you say, I really like M&M as an org. I like a brand. I like Cal. I like Javelin. I'm friendly with Officer Naughty. We talk quite a lot. But when you are one of the poorer orgs, which you know we both are, risks are part of it. It's just sometimes they don't pay off. But you can minimize your risks, which is what I tried to do this split. Yeah, I really wanted M&M to be in a different division to us so I could support them because I like them as an org. I think as far as UK orgs go, they're one of the best. But yeah, I mean we'll have to see if it improves during the split. But right now it's looking rough. But we'll see in the game on Wednesday, won't we?
Yeah. This is it, Monk. Yeah, he'll play Cogmore mid. Like...
Yeah, I am borderline worried about that because I've seen the buffs to Cogmore and I know what it's like. But you know, maybe Monk can't pull it off without his support, and that's what I'm hoping for. Or maybe we just ban it. Who knows? Playing the mind games
Monk
now.
on a Cogmore just worries me. Like it really does. Actually.
And then it'll be like Lulu top, Ivan jungle, Karma support with like Arden sensors and Redemption.
Just do a full funnel mid. Like...
Yeah. Hey, it's a contested pick, isn't it? Because we picked Lulu Cogmo last week, so who knows? We might do it again.
Let's see. I think with that then, we're pretty much all good to finish up for this episode. Is there anything else anyone wanted to touch on before we do?
No. Like, it's interesting. I do really enjoy the NLC, though. I'm actually enjoying this season more than last season. It feels a lot more, like, competitive, and I really like that.
Yeah.
Despite, obviously, we had, like, some surprises, obviously, with Barrage and stuff like that. Like, I'm really enjoying kind of just how everything is with the NLC. I do feel like I have been down on some sides, but I really enjoy it. I actually really enjoy this piece.
I'm not going to lie, I was skeptical when I heard that they were going to merge the 2 regions because I really didn't want to see the UK lose its identity. But I'd say we haven't, and I think the new league we've got is really, really good and doing a lot for the organisations. Yeah, I just hope that no one takes like any of my comments too seriously because I'm just speaking my mind. Like I don't hold a grudge against anyone or anything like that. But yeah, I've really enjoyed being on. So thanks very much for having me back.
No worries. Thanks for coming on. And yeah, that does pretty much wrap it up then. So for those that are watching live, please do feel free to follow on Twitch. I think we had a couple of followers as we've been going as well. That's all good. Thanks for those. For anyone watching later on YouTube or listening on Spotify, you can obviously follow there as well. And yeah, those that are either watching live or on YouTube can see all our Twitters on the screen. So yeah, do feel free to follow. And that's it. Thanks for listening.